In the time before heroes and war, before ships crossed the wine-dark seas to siege high-walled cities, there was a wedding. It was a grand wedding, perhaps the grandest that had ever been or ever would be. The setting was neither palace nor temple, but a bright corner of Olympus itself, high above the trembling clouds and the din of mortal life. The bride was Thetis, a sea nymph of quiet beauty and deep dignity. Her hair shimmered like wet pearl, her voice rolled like waves over sand. She had once walked freely among the gods, but no longer. For though she had the grace of immortals, she would now be wed to a mortal man, Peleus, king of Phthia, whose name would one day be forgotten except as the father of one greater than himself. Their union had been arranged, not by desire or love, but by necessity. It had been prophesied that Thetis would bear a son greater than his father, and none of the gods dared marry her. Even Zeus, who had once cast a possessive eye upon her, stepped back. So she was given to Peleus, and the gods prepared a celebration. Every immortal was invited. Almost. The halls of Olympus were trimmed in gold. The columns swirled with ivy and starlight. Great bowls of nectar glowed on polished stone tables. The hours walked among the guests, scattering blossoms and laughter. The muses sang not of tragedy or war, but of calm, of harmony, of endings that led gently into beginnings. The wind held its breath. The earth did not quake. Even the sea was still. Hera, queen of the gods, sat beside her husband Zeus, resplendent in robes of peacock blue. Athena, wise and armored, stood tall and serene, her eyes ever watchful. Aphrodite, robed in dusk-pink silk, smiled with half-lidded amusement as garlands of roses bloomed at her bare feet. They drank, they toasted, they honored the bride and the groom. But then Eris came. She had not been invited. Eris, goddess of discord, sister of Ares, the shadow in the corners of celebration. Wherever peace bloomed, Eris found a way to plant division. Where love stood, she whispered jealousy. Where joy lingered, she cracked its edges with envy. She was not welcome at this wedding, and she knew it. She did not enter with fanfare, nor make a scene. Instead, she drifted silently through the hall like a breeze that makes a candle shiver. She carried nothing with her save one small object, glowing faintly gold, a simple apple, shaped by hand or perhaps by spite. On it, in curling letters too fine to be mortal, were inscribed the words, "To the fairest." She did not cry out. She did not challenge. She simply let the apple fall. It rolled across the smooth floor like a coin across marble, a sound barely heard over the revelry. It came to rest in the center of the hall. The words upon it gleamed. And then, everything stilled. A servant bent to retrieve it, but a god's voice barked for him to stop. Hera stood first. She tilted her chin, eyes narrowing as she approached the apple. She picked it up, held it to the light, and smiled faintly. "It is clearly meant for me," she said. Then Athena stepped forward, brows drawn together like storm clouds. "Hardly. The fairest is the wisest, and that is I." A low chuckle bloomed behind them. Aphrodite, leaning gently against a pillar of ivory. "You're both mistaken," she said, her voice sweet as honey and just as sticky. "The apple is mine." The air in the hall changed. Zeus rubbed his brow, already regretting the weight of what was to come. The gods had witnessed wars and storms, monsters and plagues. They had split mountains and sunk islands. But nothing caused as much trouble in the long run as rivalry, especially among goddesses, especially when beauty was at stake. They began to argue not with screams, but with sharp-edged poise, each sure of her claim. The revelers fell silent. Thetis glanced at Peleus with unease. Even the muses ceased their song. The golden apple remained in Hera's hand, glowing faintly like the last ember in a fire that had not yet begun to burn. It could not be kept. It could not be ignored. There had to be a judgment. But who among the gods could decide? Zeus would not. He had once loved all three women, in ways both public and private. His decision would only cause more harm. He stepped back, wisely. No one else dared speak. But far away, down in the green folds of the mortal world, a man lived in quiet obscurity. He was not a king, not anymore. He was a shepherd, tending his flocks on the slopes of Mount Ida. His name was Paris. And it was to him the judgment would fall. Not yet. Not in this moment. For now, the apple sat quietly in Hera's palm, and the feast resumed, though without its earlier warmth. The celebration soured. Laughter dimmed. The golden apple, once a mere object, now held weight not of metal, but of destiny. In time, the world would burn because of it. But that night, as the stars drifted overhead and the wine ran slow and sweet, the gods returned to their places. Thetis danced once with her mortal husband. The hours picked up their blossoms again. Eris slipped away, unseen, her work complete. And on a table at the edge of the feast, forgotten for a moment, the apple sat still, glowing faintly, still inscribed, "To the fairest." Beneath the rolling mists of Mount Ida, far from the noise of palaces or the shining towers of Olympus, a young man tended sheep. He was tall and slight, with dark curls that tumbled down his shoulders. His tunic was plain, his sandals worn, and though he had once been born into royalty, now he lived as a common shepherd. His name was Paris. He did not know he was a prince, or rather, he had known once in the distant warmth of childhood, when dreams came easy. But that memory had long since faded, like smoke on the wind. He had been raised not in Troy's golden halls, but in a thatched hut nestled among the olive trees. His foster father had told him little of his origins, and Paris did not press. He was content to live simply, cradled by the rhythms of the mountain. His days were quiet. He rose with the sun, guiding his flocks to gentle meadows where the grass grew soft and plentiful. The air on Mount Ida was always cool and fragrant, scented with pine, thyme, and the faint mineral breath of mountain springs. In the afternoons, he would rest in the shade, lying back on smooth stone with his arms folded behind his head, eyes half closed as cicadas hummed around him. He was not ambitious, nor cruel, nor wise, nor foolish. He was simply peaceful. But the gods are rarely content to let peace remain. Far above the mortal world, the dispute still festered. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite had not relented. They each believed themselves the fairest. They each wanted the apple. The halls of Olympus echoed with arguments, cold stares, and clipped silences. Even Zeus, ruler of thunder, began to avoid his throne. A decision had to be made. So, the god Hermes, ever the messenger, was sent to Mount Ida, swift as light, silent as dawn. He found Paris seated on a low rock, flute in hand, watching his sheep graze. A breeze stirred his curls. His eyes were half-lidded with sleep. Hermes stepped forward. His sandals, winged and golden, left no footprints in the dirt. "Paris," he said gently. The shepherd blinked and looked up. It was not every day a god appeared. "I have a task for you," Hermes continued. "A judgment." Paris set aside his flute, curiosity flickering in his gaze. "3 goddesses await your decision. You are to judge who among them is fairest." Paris frowned. "Why me?" "Because you are mortal," Hermes said. "And because you are untainted by the courts of gods, you will be neutral." Paris almost laughed. He was no king, no sage, just a shepherd with more questions than answers. But he nodded. "Very well." Hermes gave him the golden apple. It glowed faintly, like the sun behind thick clouds. The words were still etched upon it, "To the fairest." Then the gods stepped back, and the 3 goddesses appeared. They did not arrive in thunder or flame. They simply were there, radiant, eternal, unearthly. Hera stood tall, her eyes sharp and regal. She wore a crown shaped like a citadel, and her voice carried the weight of sovereignty. Athena stood beside her, wrapped in armor that gleamed like tempered thought. A spear rested lightly in her hand, and her expression was calm, calculating. Aphrodite stood last, draped in robes that shimmered like sunset. Her hair flowed like river water, her lips curved in a knowing smile. Paris stood. The apple trembled faintly in his hand. "Speak your claims," he said softly. Hera stepped forward. "Choose me," she said, "and I will give you power. You will become king of all men, ruler over vast lands, feared and obeyed. Your name will live forever." Paris nodded. Athena took her place. "Choose me," she said, "and I will give you wisdom. The strategies of war and peace will be yours. No enemy will outwit you. No challenge will defeat you. Paris nodded again. Then Aphrodite approached. She did not speak of thrones or battlefields. She stepped close, her eyes warm as honey. "If you choose me," she whispered, "I will give you love. I will give you the most beautiful woman the world has ever known. She will be yours, body, heart, and soul." Paris was still. The apple grew heavier in his hand. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then slowly, silently, he turned toward Aphrodite. The apple passed from his hand to hers. Hera's eyes narrowed. Athena's lips thinned. No words were exchanged, but in their silence was a storm. They turned and vanished, leaving behind a chill that made the trees bend in protest. Aphrodite smiled. "You have chosen well," she said. Paris swallowed. "And who is this woman you promised me?" "She is Helen," Aphrodite replied. "Queen of Sparta." Paris blinked. He had heard the name. All Greece had. "But she is married." Aphrodite's smile deepened. "Love does not care for mortal rules." The air grew still again. The sheep wandered, unaware. The sun drifted past its zenith. Paris sat once more on his rock, the flute forgotten beside him. He did not play. Somewhere, faint and far, thunder muttered across the horizon. The golden apple had been claimed. The choice had been made. And far from the soft hills of Mount Ida, where the trees whispered gently and sheep dozed in sunlight, a different silence had begun to stir, the kind that comes just before the first crack of thunder, or just after the final breath before a storm begins. Paris had chosen Aphrodite, and now Aphrodite would keep her promise. Helen lived in Sparta. Her beauty was said to be unmatched, not just among mortals, but even among the gods. Some said her hair shimmered like gold in the morning sun. Others said her voice could hush a room the way snowfall quiets a wood. She was more than beautiful. She was luminous. And she was not alone. Helen was the wife of Menelaus, king of Sparta, a man known less for his charm than for his temper. He was proud and powerful, and he loved Helen as one loves a treasure, fiercely, jealously, as if ownership could protect what beauty invites. But the gods had made a promise. Aphrodite had sworn to Paris that Helen would be his, and what gods promise, they deliver whether the world wants it or not. Paris came to Sparta not as a shepherd, but as a prince, for by now he had returned to his birthright in Troy, embraced by King Priam and Queen Hecuba, his true parents. He arrived in Greece as an honored guest, dressed in fine robes, bearing gifts, offering peace. Menelaus welcomed him. There was feasting, toasts, and long evenings under oil lamps and stars. In the quiet corners of the palace, music drifted softly, and dancers moved like flickering flames. Paris watched Helen with wonder, not only for her beauty, but for the sadness beneath it. Even in her laughter, there was something distant in her eyes, as if she were always listening to a music only she could hear. And then quietly, without fanfare or battle, Helen disappeared. Some say she fled willingly, her heart already enchanted by Aphrodite's spell. Others say she was taken, coaxed, or carried away while Menelaus sailed to Crete. The truth, as always, lies somewhere between love and abduction, between myth and memory. But what mattered most was this: Helen was gone. When Menelaus returned, the palace was empty of her light. Her sandals sat by the door. Her comb lay on the table, still threaded with golden strands, and the silence in Sparta cracked. Menelaus did not mourn quietly. He howled. He smashed goblets against stone. He tore at curtains and roared oaths into the walls. Servants avoided him. The dogs cowered. A storm had taken root in his chest, and its winds howled through the palace. He sent messengers to every corner of Greece. He called upon oaths, once sworn oaths made long before, when Helen first chose her husband. Dozens of suitors had once gathered to win her hand, and at the time, a man named Odysseus had proposed a clever solution, that all suitors, whether chosen or not, must swear to defend the marriage, whatever came of it. Now came the reckoning. Agamemnon, king of Mycenae and brother to Menelaus, answered the call. So did Achilles, the golden warrior. So did Odysseus, though he came reluctantly, faking madness until he was exposed. From the rocky isles, from fields and forests, from the quiet corners of Greece, warriors gathered. They came not only for Helen, but for honor, for glory, for the promise of their names etched into time. And still, Troy slept. Paris and Helen had crossed the sea to his homeland, a city of high towers and strong gates. There, in the shaded gardens and marble halls, they walked hand in hand, as if the world had not changed. Music floated through colonnades. Flowers bloomed without knowing they would soon be trampled by war. And yet, not all was peace. One night, beneath the hanging lanterns of the palace courtyard, Helen stood in silence. A soft breeze stirred her gown. Her face was turned to the sky, pale in the moonlight, her features still and unreadable. Paris came to her, gently, hesitantly. "You are quiet," he said. She did not look at him. "Do you ever wonder what we've done?" He hesitated, unsure. "The gods have blessed us." "The gods," she whispered, "do not bless. They bind." She finally turned to him. Her eyes were full of distant stars, and something else, not regret, but the weight of knowledge. "They use us, like pieces in a game we cannot see." Paris took her hand. It trembled slightly. Neither spoke further. Far above them, two goddesses watched. Hera, still bitter. Athena, still insulted. They had not forgotten Paris's judgment, and now the perfect opportunity had come to let their vengeance bloom. They whispered into mortal ears. They stirred ambition, fanned pride, darkened dreams. They laced dreams with omens and salted wind with fury. And soon the ships came, 1,000 sails, ivory white, filling the sea like a flock of birds descending. The Greeks had come for Helen, and for war. But that is another story. This story ends not with battle, but with the moments just before, when breath holds still in the chest, when a city sleeps uneasily beneath clouded skies, and when a prince, once a shepherd, watches from his window as torches flicker along the horizon. Paris holds Helen's hand. He does not speak. She does not ask. They know the world is changing. In the quiet before dawn, the golden apple rests on a table. Its glow is faded now, the letters worn but still legible. To the fairest. It was just a gift, just a token, but gifts, like choices, are never without weight, especially when gods are involved. And so ends the tale of the judgment of Paris, not with a roar, but with a whisper. A golden apple, a promise, a stolen queen, and the first shadow of a 10-year war that would burn itself into legend. Sleep now, gentle listener. The story will wait.